Promotional consideration has been provided by the Brewers Association and the American Homebrewers Association, the only national organization dedicated to the art and hobby of homebrewing. For more information, visit beertown.org.
I'll show you what my brewery looks like really quickly. I come over here, I make a little noise.
If you're a home brewer in the United States, or if you enjoy great American craft beer, you can probably thank this man.
Put it on the stove over here. Get my stirring stick, and I start making beer. Turn on the stove. And when it's a nice day, I'll take out the Cajun cooker, my propane, and right out in the yard out there. And then I'll go over here to the 3-door refrigerator, which is set at about 35 degrees, and I will crack a beer to have a homebrew while I'm making homebrew.
Charlie Papazian is the author of some of the best-selling books on home brewing, founder of the American Homebrewers Association, and organizer of the Great American Beer Festival and the World Beer Cup.
I got a 6x9 walk-in cooler here that stays about 55 degrees, 54 degrees, and as you can see, I got a golden lager here. It's called Kings and Vagabonds Golden Lager that will be ready. What's today? Today is early or late September, maybe by Christmas time. See, I can afford to wait because I have a pretty good stash of beer.
We spent the morning with Charlie at his home near Boulder, Colorado, where he showed us his home brewery and treated us to beer and conversation in his living room.
Well, Charlie Papazian, welcome to Basic Brewing Video.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
It's such an honor to interview you to begin with, but then to do it in your house is especially an honor, and I appreciate your having us over.
Well, having it in my house is pretty convenient for me because it's really close to my homebrew.
Hey!
So let's start out this way, I guess.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And we just happen to have some homebrew right here. What are we drinking?
Well, you're drinking a Pilsner that's made with a little bit of rice to lighten it up, kind of a summer, very hoppy German-style Pilsner.
Very nice.
We just, most people don't know there's rice in it. And then this is a ordinary bitter, kind of English-style pub ale.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Something you can drink a lot of.
So you still brew?
Yep, I certainly do. I brewed 2 days ago. What did I brew? I brewed a what I'm calling Kings and Vagabonds Golden Lager. It's a variation between a Pilsner and a German-style lager with some Belgian malts in it and a few more interesting things.
Wow. So you play around and have fun.
Oh, I play around a lot with malts and hops mostly.
So how did you get your start? I mean, you helped me get started homebrewing through your book, but how did you get started?
Well, I started homebrewing when I was going to the University of Virginia as an undergraduate student, and after my first batch of homebrew, of which homebrewing I was introduced by a friend of mine who had an old-time neighbor who brewed during Prohibition, and he's an old-timer, and he was still making beer, and we tasted one of his good beers, one of the ones in the basement that was like a year or two old. It was crystal clear, and it was way better and much more interesting than the 69 cents a six-pack beer we were drinking at the students. 69 cents a six-pack, can you imagine? That's a little bit more than 10 cents a beer. That's amazing. But that's what we were drinking, and most of the light lagers at the time were, we drank as students, but... And so I started making beer, and I discovered early on that when you made homebrew, good homebrew, and your friends really appreciated it, and a community evolved very quickly from people who really discovered that they liked beer, and their interest perked, and consequently I was teaching beer making classes not only in Virginia, but when I moved here to Boulder, Colorado in the 70s and early 80s, and one thing evolved to another.
So what was the next evolution? Did the book come next?
Well, I published, self-published earlier versions of my book, of which there's probably 2,000 or 3,000 copies circulating out there in used bookstores or here and there. But I was teaching classes through 81 or 82, and in 1978, a friend of mine, Charlie Papazian, and we were both school teachers at the time, we decided to start a newsletter called Zymergy, and the newsletter turned into a magazine, which turned into an American Homebrewers Association, which turned into the Great American Beer Festival, which turned into Brewing Association, and you know, the rest of the story kind of kept going. And during that time, I also was approached by a publisher. Let's say we approached them, and they bit, and I was commissioned to write my The Complete Joy of Home Brewing, which first came out in the big fat edition in 1984, I believe.
Huh.
Yeah.
And I think that what has made that book so successful is how you take home brewing and you make it simple. Just the way your writing style and the way you explain the technique really takes a lot of the fear, in my opinion, out of the process. And you came up with the mantra for home
Like,
brewers.
relax, don't worry, have a home brew?
Yes. How did that come about? What's the story behind that saying?
Well, my friend Charlie Papazian and I, in the early days, we did a lot of traveling, research, of course, traveling with homebrew, and then we were stuck out in the desert one time in a dry wash, and we couldn't get out, and we were basically very concerned as the thunderheads were rolling over the horizon and flash flood warnings were coming over the radio, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and we could not get our car unstuck out of the sand. And finally, we kind of half gave up and said, wait a minute, we have a case of homebrew in the trunk of the car. Let's pause and have a homebrew. And so we did. We relaxed, didn't worry for about a half hour, had a couple of homebrews, and lo and behold, within minutes, we found a piece of wood in the desert, which is a rare thing to find. And it was like, you know, if it weren't for homebrew, we would have been stuck there still. I mean, our skeletons would have been bleached in the desert. The two Charlies would have been discovered with a case of empty homebrew with no skin on our flag.
So it not only applies to homebrewing itself, but to life in general.
Absolutely. You know, when you know, worrying is like paying a debt that you may never have owed.
Do you find that people can, when they're brewing, especially for the first time, can get stuck on the details?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's, you know, there's so much involved with brewing beer. I mean, everybody has their own theories and their own way of doing things, and there are all kinds of nuances, but the process itself is very basic and accessible, as you know. And I'm sure all the listeners and viewers know. It's accessible to anyone. If you have basically a pot and a stove and a spoon to stir some ingredients in, and you know how to siphon from one container to another, you can make beer. And you know, you try to boil it down to the simplest approach, and that's what my book was about. And you know, reminding people to relax, not worry, have a homebrew at every step. Has paid off, I think. You know, over 1 million copies of my books have turned on probably 1.5 million homebrewers over the last 20 years, and it continues to do so. And you know, a lot of people, not a lot, a few people criticize me that I relax too much, and you know, how can you deny somebody the opportunity to relax? You know, if you can't relax and don't want to relax, so be it. That's your approach. But my approach and the approach of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of other people is that we really appreciate the beer we make, and the energy that you feel during, I don't want to sound too woo-woo-y, you know, but you know, the energy you feel when you're brewing kind of gets instilled into the beer, and when people drink it, it comes right back out. So if you're a happy brewer when you're making it, the people who are going to be enjoying your beer are going to be happy people as well.
And if it makes you happy to be more tense about your brewing process and to pay attention to every little detail and to control every bit of the process, if that makes you happy, that's fine too.
That's the whole, that you got it. That's the theme. You know, if that's what you really enjoy, enjoy stressing out a little bit while you're brewing, that's good, as long as you're enjoying it. If it's ruining the whole experience, just find another hobby, because that's not what hobbies are supposed to be like.
Well, let's talk about the American Homebrewers Association. Homebrewers themselves are kind of nonconformists in that they are going out there and they're doing their own thing and they're not just accepting what's out there. Why should someone like that want to join the AHA?
Good question. I think I have some answers. You know, the community of beer enthusiasts and home brewers is relatively small. I mean, though there are millions and millions of people that appreciate good beer. As you know, there's microbrewing and craft brewing and pub brewing, and people just love their beer. But the community, joining a community of people who are really into the hobby and willing to invest a bit of their basically money and time and resources, volunteering for things, really creates that spirit that has perpetuated homebrewing. I mean, if there wasn't an American Homebrewers Association or the great publications that are out there, or even your internet site, I mean, everybody would be very individualistic, like you've mentioned, but there would be no community. And part of that community, like I mentioned earlier, that I discovered very early on, that it's the community of people that enjoy good beer together, making good beer together, talking about beer when they're out, that really has really perpetuated the whole concept of quality beer. Because, you know, back when I first started, there were, I won't even say few choices, there were no choices. If you wanted good beer, you had to make it yourself. Well, good beer. If you wanted beer with flavor and character to it, and hops and malt, you had to make it yourself. And if it wasn't for the dialogues we had and the exchange of information, because brewing is always evolving, and there's always new ingredients and new techniques and new ideas and more interesting approaches on how to make beer, whether you're brewing in oak barrels or fermenting with a certain kind of fruit, or a new yeast has come out. If you don't have that community, you know, beer stagnates. And when beer stagnates, you saw what happened in the 70s. There was no choice. And we don't want to go back there.
So how does the AHA connect people?
Well, we have a magazine called Zarmaji Magazine that comes out 6 times a year. We have a national conference that attracts nearly 1,000 people. We have a national homebrew competition, which is the biggest, world's largest, the galaxy's largest beer competition ever in the history of mankind. Over 4,500 entries. We have an internet site called beertown.org, www.beertown.org. We have a daily forum that goes out to, I believe it's almost 8,000 home brewers every single day, 5 days a week. We take the weekends off to make our own beer. So, you know, if you have ever been on Tech Talk, you know, that is just a tremendous resource. There are usually 10 to 25 people contributing every day, people asking questions and people replying and contributing news and information what's going on in their area, or how about this, or what about this or that. It's a great resource. So it's about the community of home brewers.
And I am an AHA member, and I get Tech Talk, and it's the spirit of that communications piece where people can write in with very basic questions, or people can write in with advanced questions, and they get the same weight. You know,
yeah, exactly.
Nobody says that's a stupid question. Why would anybody ask that? You know, everybody wants to share the information, and nobody has kind of a proprietary feel about their homebrewing method. If they discover something that makes good homebrews, it seems like to me that they're the first to rush out and share it with everybody else.
Yeah. Some people say that the Tech Talk is worth the price of membership. alone. You know, let alone getting a magazine and you know, discounts towards, you know, brew pubs. I mean, there's over 300 brew pubs and better beer establishments around the country that people can go in with their American Homebrewers Association membership card and get anywhere from a 5 to 20% discount off the food and beer we're drinking.
Oh, by the way. So, where is homebrewing? Or let's talk about the craft beer movement. The swelling of the numbers of homebrewers has led to not only good homebrew, but good commercial beers as well.
Absolutely. Yep. And, you know, a lot of those, I'd say 95% of those craft brewers, whether they be pub brewers or large regional craft brewers, had their roots in home brewing. We have a program. We have about 15 to 20 membership rallies a year, and they take place at member craft breweries around the country, where basically, if you're a member, you get in free and you enjoy the beer and the food and the camaraderie. So there's all, you know, you asked me the benefits of being part of the AHA. There's so many that it's, to say it in a few words is not possible.
So where do we go from here? What's the next step? It seems to me that the beer industry as a whole in the United States is in an evolutionary stage.
It's constantly in the evolutionary, and a lot, you know, there was in the late, let's say the mid-90s, in the mid-90s there was a swelling in the ranks of homebrewers. You know, that was a time when lots of people were working long hours, they had lots of money in their pocket, and craft brewers came onto the scene, and a lot of those home brewers said, hey, why do I need to make beer anymore? I can go buy this great stuff. It costs a little more, but, you know, there's value in paying, you know, I'm paying good money for good beer, so I'm getting my money's worth. So a lot of people got out of the hobby, but what we're finding now is people are starting to come back into the fold because, you know, they actually miss the hobby. And that's something that I continue to do, as you mentioned earlier on. After 36 years, I'm still making beer. I make 15 to 16, 17 batches of beer a year. And I do it because it's still a hobby for me. I love the process. I like going out into my brew room and firing up the stove and putting in the grains or mixing in the malt extract and experimenting with hops. And, you know, my wife and I like to cook. We eat in the house most of the time because when we do travel, we eat out, and when we're around home, you know, we prefer to cook our own meals. We like to put things together, and it's part of our lifestyle, and making beer is such an enjoyable hobby.
Well, we certainly enjoy it. And I certainly appreciate your having us out, and it's been wonderful talking to you. And we're going to talk with Charlie a little bit more on the audio side. So we're going to get into the more technical stuff because we're going to pick Charlie's brain a little bit on the beer geek side. So.
Oh, I love the challenging questions. I can always answer them. I can't answer them always as thoroughly as somebody might want, but I'll answer them.
Well, thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Come and visit us on the web. At basicbrewing.com, you can find archive lists of episodes from both our video and audio podcasts on home brewing. You can also find a special deal on our home brewing DVDs. In Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, we walk you through the extract beer brewing process from boiling to bottling. And in our Stepping into All Grain DVD, we take you through all grain brewing from milling your grain to collecting your wort. It's easy once you know how, and we'll show you how. Feel free to drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. You can email James at basicbrewing.com or use the contact form on basicbrewing.com.
Relax, don't worry, have a home brew?
Yes.